Okay, welcome everybody to a continuation of A Course in Miracles. We're starting on page 450, but actually the paragraph of the section of page 50 starts on 49. So we're going to start on 49 and then work our way through that way. I am here with Fannie and Annie Michelle, and yeah, so we're going to jump right into it. So it's been really interesting, this whole journey with this book, I find, because it's really helped to allow myself in particular to really recognize when my mind is kind of running away with itself on such a different level. Like, I find the last couple of years has been help. Like, I've been doing this anyway, but now with this book, it's like I see myself more and more relying on the energy that's running through me rather than the mind that wants to tell me a bunch of stuff about what reality is all about. Are you guys finding the same thing?
Big time, especially like in the past couple months. I feel like I'm integrating it and embodying it in like at a whole new level and a whole new depth, where I'm really feeling that I'm just a channel, and like Holy Spirit is just kind of like moving me and guiding me and speaking through me more, and I'm like more aware of it, if that makes sense. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, it's like there's more and more of those moments when you're just like stepping into action and you don't even like, you're like, oh, I guess I'm doing this and here we go. And then it just seems like it's unfolding in such a more like fruition way. Does that make any sense? Like, how about you, Annie? Do you find?
Sorry, I just lost the screen, so I'm trying to find it again. So maybe you can just continue without me for a moment while I fix whatever happened.
Sure. Yeah, so I find that that's been a huge, and it's almost like a relief too, right? Because I find I'm not getting so bogged down by the actual incidences and what's happening. And then also kind of listening to the energy and how the energy is kind of ebbing and flowing and the influences of the planets, and like hearing about, all of the traumas that are coming to the surface and the healing and all of that stuff, and just allowing myself to be in all of that, but not get sucked into the edges of the chaos of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. And because it's the mind that, starts to buy into, and that can be such a like unfolding of fake news and like falling into, that the chaos of it,
Right.
So, but yeah, it's been really interesting to find.
And do you find that it's happening like effortlessly?
Much more effort.
Or just like noticing and catching yourself, like going with the ego mind versus like I don't know where I was reading a Marianne Williamson book. And instead of calling it like Holy Spirit, she calls it like divine mind. And I kind of like that, the ego mind and divine mind. And yeah, like kind of like noticing the difference between the two and noticing how easier it is to flow with divine mind instead of the ego. Like it's almost like it's easier to be aware for some reason. And I don't know, like for me, I don't know personally what shifted. It's just happening. And I'm like, okay, let's go for the ride.
Game. Yeah. And I feel like it's just the work that, we've done that allows that space to be able to step into that divine mind. You know what I mean? Like, where was I going? It's okay. It's gone now. But yeah, I really love that idea of listening to the divine mind much more than the ego mind. Oh, this is where I was going with that. It's as though when you're thinking with the ego mind, it's like very constricting and like, you don't feel the expandedness that comes with like following the divine thinking, that just have faith and have courage and like all of that, instead of why are you doing this? What's wrong? Like, it's just a different perspective, and recognizing that when you're following the divine mind, your energy expands, it opens. It's like, more people are drawn in. There's just more, it's more inclusive. Everybody's raising up in that way. Whereas when you're stuck in the ego mind, it's like everybody is, maybe in a box, or we're not seeing the innocence and the truth of the people that are around us or ourselves.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And
You
this,
said a lot.
I know.
You just know that it's landing well.
And I love this section so much because it's really starting to make this definition about ego and creation and like spirit, right? And I did a show with a lady on Wednesday, and it was called Motivation versus Inspiration. And we talked about, when we're motivated, sometimes when the motivation is not inspired by, like spirit in some way, that it's like, trying to paddle uphill, like upstream. Whereas when we're motivated with spirit, it's like things flow so much easier. It's easier to develop those habits. It's easier to, do the things that are required to reach the goal. And this was something that was starting to come up in this section as I was rereading everything last night and this morning. I was like, oh, there it is, and they talk about at one point, which I think we'll talk about, is when you're inspired, you're in spirit.
Mm.
And I was like, yes, absolutely. That's that alignment that we're all looking for, because it's so peaceful and easy to get things done when we do it from that perspective.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, yay. Okay. So if we go to creating versus the self-image, the first one that I have highlighted is paragraph 2. You cannot resolve the authority problem by depreciating the power of your mind. To do so is to deceive yourself, and this will hurt you because you really understand the strength of the mind. So this is, we all have authority issues, most of us anyways, because when we learn how to like walk and be in the world, like, when your parents, you're just starting to discover the world and they're starting to use the word no. A lot of parents are not aware of how powerful those early moments are. And sometimes if they walk in on you and you're like going through something in the kitchen, like say you're cleaning, like playing with cleaning products, and your parent walks in and is like, oh, like what, and doesn't go back to help you regulate the shock that created for the child, you automatically step into an authority problem. So either you're going to have problems with authority and be scared of authority, or you're going to have this issue of being a rebellion against the authority. It all depends on, what your internal structures are made for. But I thought this was such an interesting thing, because that is your first introduction to authority in your ego.
Mm.
And, a lot of times later on, our ideas of God and authority come from these experiences. So if we're like looking at the God experience through the ego side, it's like, looking at religion and how it's structured, and you can do this and you're born a sinner, and you're like, don't do that and be, this, it becomes almost impossible to meet all of those restrictions, because the spirit requires us to have more free flow. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, it does. And I guess what's coming up for me as I'm hearing all of this is like this authority problem gets created, or this this perception, this program gets downloaded in us from such a young age. And the whole work that they talk about is in this book is to come back to like right-minded thinking and going to shift these experiences so we perceive it through the lens of spirit and in love instead of ego and fear. And I just keep thinking of like the inner child work that I keep doing. I'm like, it's like such a powerful bridge to go shift these perceptions, a powerful tool to go shift these perceptions and bring us back to like this state of alignment. And like, instead of being the victim and being scared, seeing like, okay, it's just the way that I perceived it to be true that's creating like all these problems. Absolutely. So yeah, that's kind of where my mind went.
I know. And you can't help, like, I can't help, like almost every section of this book just brings me back to it, because we just keep going, like inner child work is just going back to that child and helping that child to regulate emotion that it didn't get help regulating.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then helping the child to understand the truth of the situation. And once we do that, then all aspects of our mind, because our mind is built on all of these like different realities, all aspect of our mind comes into alignment. And the more it does that, it's living more in truth, it's living more in love, it's living more in peace.
Right.
And when we can live in that state, then divine energy and spirit is literally what drives in that state.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I mean, it's incredible.
It really is.
Mm-hmm. The next one that
I just wanted to add that it makes me think that because the child has because like the parent can never be perfect, and like you say, it's gonna accidentally react in ways that are gonna like bother the child. But if we were living in a society that was maybe more balanced, or that we had brought like God or Mother Nature or whatever kind of great spirit in the consciousness of the kid, it would maybe feel more supported, as if it would have that maternal or that like positive authority figure to like be there for it or her or him. Mm-hmm. So it's sad that that's missing, because I'm sure that if we were living like, like hundreds of years ago when that was more balanced, it must have happened maybe a bit less, because the child felt less alone all the time, maybe against that situation.
And I feel as though survival has been such a pinpoint to human existence for so long that we're only now getting to a point where survival is becoming a little easier. Mm-hmm. So that's the only way to heal trauma is when you feel safe. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to feel safe 100%. There only has to be a small bit. But, our generations in the past just didn't have that. There's been so many wars. There's been so many, moms were having 10 to 12 kids and, having to do all the cleaning, all the cooking, caring for the children. How can you be present? Mm-hmm. How can you be aware that if one child is crying their face off, that they need emotional regulation? It's impossible.
Yeah.
To be there for that many kids at one time. And then dad is usually gone working for many hours of the day, or sometimes weeks at a time. And so the mom is left alone. Like, nobody feels safe in that situation. And there's no way that anybody can be emotionally present to help somebody feel emotionally regulated in those situations. That's how I think. And we're only now getting to a point where we can start to feel safer. We can start to allow ourselves to open up to these more vulnerable parts of our emotions and go back and heal. And it's only now where we can see that the parenting is becoming more aware of that, of the needs of the child to be able to help them regulate their emotions. Because ultimately, what was happening and what's been happening for generations is that the child has been there for the parent. Right. So the child is the pattern is the child is there helping the parent regulate their emotions instead of the other way around.
I just wonder if the child was taught at a young age what we're learning now in the book, if in general they would feel less often unsafe and less often, those negative feelings, because they would have a whole different perspective on life, and they wouldn't necessarily be waiting for someone to protect them, because they would know that they're always protected, and to a certain extent they're still a child, so they would still need their parent. But I mean, it would, imagine knowing all this from a young age. Your parents just taught you, you grew up with this knowledge that we're learning now, how different your whole perspective would be on everything. Even as a kid, you would live through all these like traumatizing moments, I think, in a different way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that does require your parents to be emotionally available. I don't think that anybody could teach this information to a child and just say with words like, hey, so God is always there for you and never alone. So, I can treat you like crap, and that you're still going to end up like, I don't think, because the child's like the first 9 years of the child's life we're emotionally interpreting. So we're gaining our emotional language. And a lot of times parents don't have their own emotional language figured out.
Yeah.
So how can you help your child to discover their emotional language? And that's what we're supposed to do, is help them to discover their emotional language.
Yeah.
Like I can look at my daughter and, this information has really become much more front and foremost in my life, probably in the last, I'd say 4 years, maybe 5, where I've really been aware of her emotional stance and helping her understand like what is God and who is God, and how do we have that presence in our life, and how do we use all of ourselves to be present in the world and discern and all of that stuff. It's been such an interesting journey with her, but I see her, she feels safe in the world way more than I did when I was her age, and it's only because I can lay with her and I can hold her and make sure that I'm there for her. She's not there for me.
Yeah.
Right.
Although sometimes she finds herself there for me sometimes, but most of the time it's me listening and understanding where her stance is and helping her understand what's going on inside.
Yeah. It makes sense, because even in the book they say that we teach by living it and not by trying to explain it with our words to someone else either, so she's just seeing you living it out more and more each day, and that's how she's actually understanding it, I think.
Oh yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, not to say that she doesn't have her insecure moments, because she does. It's just that I don't find that they last as long. Like I look at her age compared to where I was at that time, and I'm like, wow, girl, you've got it going on. Yeah.
It's so fascinating.
It is fascinating. It really is.
I had this little break aha moment yesterday. I feel like we're kind of derailing, actually.
Okay, it's okay.
I had this aha moment last night with this teenager that I'm working with, and she was having an emotional crisis and kind of distancing. And part of me wanted to go to her and tell her, if you need me, I'm here and we can talk about, what's going on. And I wanted to explain it to her, what I could do. And then at the same time, I'm like, oh no, just do it and be there instead of explaining it. And then, because let's go. Maybe it's not flowing as maybe it's not sounding like I was experiencing it yesterday, but do you guys know what I mean?
I 100% understand what you mean. Yeah.
Okay. Presence is so powerful.
It is.
And sometimes they don't want to talk. They just need somebody present. That's it. Just need somebody to hold space for them. They don't want to have to intellectualize it or anything like that. It's the same thing with us. Sometimes it's you don't want to have to talk it out a million times. You just want to sit with it, and just having somebody who can sit in silence in that room with you is so powerful sometimes. So incredible. All right, so the next section that I thought was really interesting. So if we continue that sentence, you also realize that you cannot weaken it any more than you can weaken God. The devil, quote unquote, is a frightening concept because he seems to be extremely powerful and extremely active. He is perceived as a force in combat with God, battling him for possession of his creations. I think that's like, okay, the devil deceives by lies and builds kingdoms in which everything is in direct opposition to God, yet he attracts men rather than repels them, and they are willing to sell, quote unquote, him their soul in return for gifts of no real worth. This makes absolutely no sense. So, okay, I really wanted to bring that up. What is your interpretation of that?
I have to like kind of read it again really quickly, actually. So Annie, if you have anything to say, go for it.
I'm going to reread it too quickly.
Devil is a frightening concept because he seems to be extremely powerful and extremely active. He is perceived as a force in combat with God, battling him for possessions of his creations. The devil deceives by lies and builds kingdoms in which everything is. It's like this whole ego like dance that we're living in, right? Which, well, like we mentioned earlier, the whole like survival mode that we've been in, and the what's familiar, what's known, what's comfortable, it's so much easier to stay there. So when this is like, yet he attracts men rather than repels them, like it's so much easier to stay there than to lean into the unknown and to have faith and to trust like the divine mind talking to us, you know, what we know is right, but yet it's scary to follow through on what we feel is like really internally right.
Yeah, I think similar. I think that we kind of, that the Bible kind of symbolized the belief in separation by the devil in a way. So that belief in separation is the devil because it's deceiving us with the lies and promising all these things that aren't real and that has no worth. But if we could just stick to right-mindedness, we would be in the light and with God. So that's how I understand it.
Absolutely. That's what I was thinking too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is the devil is the lies that the mind tells us, right? It's the miscreations that we create with our mind. Right? Because when we're creating from our own ego and our own mind, those creations don't have the solid foundation than when we create them from our, spirit self. And therefore, a lot of times that's like the selling of the soul.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting because they talk about that like in the chapters coming up after too, about like this foundation that we've built, the foundation that we already have for divine mind, for our spirit, and the foundation that we've built for the fear mind and for our ego, and how in a way they're both strong and stable, but it's like the beliefs that are stacked on it, these perceptions, I guess, that we've built this ego foundation on, that can be I'm kind of seeing like the kid that I was working with yesterday was playing Minecraft, and I just see this hammer of like breaking off the perceptions and like breaking down the foundation that the ego mind is built on. And you can hammer that one away, but the one from spirit, you can't. Like that one is always going to be
solid foundation. Anything built in love is a solid foundation.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I like, Annie, how you kind of like brought up how like the Bible makes us perceive that from the get-go at the separation, that's the devil influencing us. And they mention it in like paragraph 3 that the fruit of only one tree was forbidden in the symbolic garden, but God could not have forbidden it, or it could not have been eaten. It's like right from the get-go, we're told that it was forbidden to eat this fruit, yet we ate it. And that was actually like the gift that we were given in this way to experience this life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This, the duality, the contrast, all of it. Kind of like skipping ahead to the next chapter, to the next paragraph there, but yeah.
Yeah, and it follows saying that God wouldn't have put us in this position where our own destruction was actually possible. Like it follows up saying that, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But it just, to go back with the gifts that the devil offers, it shows just to what extent that we're wrong-mindedness, because when you understand what we're understanding through the book now, you would never accept, let's say, like the devil would say, I'll take your soul in exchange of a mansion, or like sex with the most beautiful woman, or this or that. But when you understand that like your eternity and love and light, all these gifts would have no value whatsoever in exchange, you know? So it just shows how far off the mark we are at some points in our life. Sometimes there's some people that think that way to try to want material gains, you know?
That brings up a thought about manifesting, actually. And
right.
I kind of want to like, well, okay, so yeah, we can like so easily get attached to like these things that we think that we want in our lives, kind of like I was saying earlier, Linda, about my horse blinders and thinking that I was like supposed to walk this one path and that's it, when really there's like so many other things that could serve us a whole lot better if we just kind of like surrender that control of thinking that like we need and desire these specific things. So I often wonder, like, even though we have these desires that are perceived to be good, is desire always rooted in ego? Even if it's perceived to, even if it's a good thing, you know?
Well, I mean, there has to be a joining between spirit and mind at some point, right? We have like, there has to be some kind of like, well, I would have to say like a submission of the ego to the spirit thinking.
Right.
Because no matter what, the ego is still the one that's like is carrying us through the steps to get to the other side. Like, do you know what I mean by that? Like, even though ego is very twisted sometimes in the way that it's thinking, but that's more based on like past experiences. And once we align all of those past experiences with our now mind and love and guidance and all of that, then spirit and mind become one, right? I would have to, I don't know, that's just my thinking, I guess, because I just see that happening in my own life. The more that I go back and like connect with those other parts of me that are not in alignment with spirit and love, and help that part of my mind to come back into alignment with spirit and love, then more and more I see my life manifesting and moving together as, you know, like, okay, this is what I mean. So spirit can be like, hey, I want you to go read this book. Well, it's my mind that knows how to read to be able to read the book. Like, it's my ego that's learned how to read to be able to read the book. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the two have to be married together. It's like, you know, we can, like, spirit can come in and say, hey, I want you to do this. But sometimes we have to learn a bunch of stuff to be able to do that. So it's like adjusting the ego to the spirit.
Right.
It's like, I would guess that's the atonement, right?
Maybe.
I don't know about like the terminology, but I would assume that's atonement when you're like aligning your mind with what spirit wants.
So I guess the way that I see atonement is like the removing of fear. And if you're acting from a place of taking action and moving through life, through making decisions from a place of that's coming from love and not fear, not the ego, then yes. Because I love everything that you just said, because like we're still human. Yes, we have our spirit, but we still have this physical body that's our vessel, that's our vehicle, and it's here to move us so that we can be like the teachers.
Yeah.
So like we can be the miracle workers and the teachers that we're all here to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Annie?
Well, I sure still feel that, like, for the book example, if you feel a calling to read a book or like have a specific job or live in a community, you still have to take the actions necessary to get there, I guess. Like, okay, I'm going to need the money to buy the book. I need to figure out where's the book. So you still have to take some actions in your physical world to get to where you feel spirit wants you to be, I guess. And of course, you can check in all the time. So what's the better way to like get the money for the book? And then you can tune in and be like, find a job that makes you happy, or maybe you can do this or that, but I mean, of course, you still have to physically take the actions.
Right. So interesting. Like that's where presence is so powerful too. Being present and listening to like what we're being led and guided to do in the specific moment.
Yeah. And I feel non-attachment is so important, because maybe, let's say spirit, it wants you to read this book, but that's not the actual intention. It actually maybe wants you in the end to do something else. But the steps that you're going to take in order to get the book is bring you somewhere completely new that you wouldn't have been, if that makes sense. And then in the end, you're like, wait, I never ended up reading that book, but I found this job and met this person and moved to this place. So like, if you're not attached to like the fact that you desired the book to start with, I don't know if it makes sense, but in a way that was just like the means to the ends to bring you somewhere else, maybe.
And expectation is such a powerful thing. And it's such a concept of the ego. Like we could have these desires, but if we get too attached to what the outcome looks like, we miss the whole point sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And actually, it's you, Fannie, that told me the other day, I was listening to audios and you were saying that when you're disappointed, you know that you had an expectation, or else you wouldn't have been disappointed to start with. So Fannie's wise words, I was like, oh, that's so true.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I say that all the time in my readings too. Like there's, when we have high expectations, we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment. And I mean, we have to have expectations. We have to, you have to have a certain level of them, because that's like discernment and expectation, I think kind of connect together a little bit. Like, you have to have a level of respect from other people. And that's an expectation of, in order to be able to maintain your inner peace, there has to be a level of expectation coming from the people around you and from yourself. But not so strong on the outcome that you miss the journey of the experience, That's a really great conversation.
Yeah.
Really love it.
All right, so the next one that I have is the beginning of paragraph 4. It says, eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a symbolic expression for usurping the ability for self-creating. Now, I always just thought, like, when I read that, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because it's like eating the fruit was us taking the power of our own creation into our own hands. And then earlier on, it talks about how God said that he would not interrupt our mind or our own thinking, because it would undermine us and our thinking and our free will. And I just thought that was really interesting, because we are powerful creators, but when we're creating from our own ego, or when we're creating with spirit, is what kinds of creations are we bringing in? Are they miracle based, or are they just, just creations that we're working really hard to create in our mind?
Right. Yeah, this paragraph has got me like, it's got my wheels going for sure. Because I'm like, when it says like on line 6, you can perceive yourself as self-creating, but you cannot do more than believe it. And like when you finally perceive correctly, you can only be glad that you cannot. I have like question marks all over this paragraph. I'm like, what does this mean?
Well,
or go ahead.
yeah. So what I hear there is you can create everything you want, and you can, but the only thing that's creating that creation is your belief in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not God's belief in it. Because what God doesn't create, he is not aware of. That's what it talks about earlier in the book. Like, he has no awareness of our miscreations, like what we create on our own. He has no awareness of that. So, and therefore we can't make it true to God. And if it's not true to God, it's not real. And that would be like building in that foundation that, that's easily breaks apart. And eventually it will break apart, because that's like, eventually God will take his place in your being and in your life and in your creations. And when he does, that's when all of that fake foundation gets wiped out. And then that's when you go into, and as I said before, when you finally perceive correctly, which is perceiving with God and spirit, you can only be glad that you cannot create. Because what he puts in place is way more beneficial, way more full of love, peace, and joy than what we're able to put in place.
Yeah, which for me comes back to a bit like the manifestation thing, that people try to manifest things. But at this point in my understanding of the book and everything, I always think, how can I think to know what's best for me with like the meager perception that I have here, when like God has an eagle view of everything and everyone and all the possibilities and all the connections between. So like, how can I like think that I know what's best for me? So why desire anything specifically? And like, it makes more sense to just pray and desire for the best outcome possible, or the most beneficial thing, than to choose a specific thing I want and be attached to that,
Yeah, that's very interesting. Because like, yeah, I look at this and it's like, how do you know you're making your because I liked in the book how they differentiate like making versus creating. It's like, how do we know that we're making from our ego, or really creating through God and through like the power of like the Holy Spirit and love, because I look at like the word like self-creating and the self-identity, and for me it's like I have this belief that we're all self-healers, that we're all like, we all create, we have the power to create everything in our lives, and it's all based like in the I and when I say it, I feel like it comes from a place of it's bigger than me, but at the same time, I'm like, no, I have all the power. Does that make sense? Am I saying that clearly?
I kind of misunderstood what you mean. It's bigger than you, but you have all the power. So which one, both are true at the same time for you, or one is truer than the other? I'm just trying to understand.
They're kind of both are true at the same time. Yeah. But the fact that there's that belief of like being a self-healer, but through the power, when you're doing it in the awareness and the like you're conscious that there's a bigger source fueling you, maybe. I don't know. Again, like I said, this whole paragraph has got me like really thinking. Like, oh, okay.
It reminds me of a memory I have. Once I was in ceremony when I was in Ecuador, and one of the shamans had said, he was explaining this big story, and we're all under the plant medicines and all that. So like, it just felt so powerful. And at one point he was just like, and then I just realized that I had no control on my life. And then he looked at us and he was like, and it was such a relief to realize that. And I'll always remember that moment, because it felt a relief it's like if I released all that too, and being like, what a relief it is to know that we don't really control anything in a way. Like, I know that we do in a certain way, but to just be like, we have no control really, are we like just this driftwood in the ocean? And when, in a way it's like, it takes off so much pressure, and like your mind doesn't have to work so much on trying to plan every little detail and how this person's going to react and where you're, I don't know, it's just such a relief to realize how little control you have.
Mm.
I really like that too. And just letting go of, you know, because in the process of manifestation, they tell you the importance of like, how are you going to think when you have it? How are you going to feel when you have it? How's it going to smell? How's it going to taste? How's it going to, it's like, you know, I've really let go of all of that because it's really a waste of energy. Like so many things that I've wished for and like tried to manifest, and how much energy I've spent trying to bring these things into my life. Whereas lately, I just find myself asking God, like, you know, show me how, show me how to manifest love and abundance in my life. Show me how to align my mind so that I can see those perspectives, or not perspectives, but those truths in my life. Show me. I'm open. I want to know now, instead of like, you know, taking it from that perspective of putting all of this energy into the idea of what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it reminds me a bit when we're taught as children to make a list for Santa. I want this, I want that. Like, it's kind of like we grow up in that mentality instead of being like, I want whatever you think is going to make me happy, you know? It's like so different, that shift of like, you know?
How the conversation happens. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I totally agree. And for me, the manifestation thing brought up more frustration and disappointment, and like not depression, but like negativity anyways to my life. Like the years that I tried to practice that, I think, and I truly believed in it, but it didn't pan out as much as I would have thought. So when I hear these messages, it just resonates so much truer to me.
Absolutely. And letting go. And not to say, like, I find that one thing that works really good for me is if I want to get a task done that I feel is like really overwhelming, if I visualize myself doing that task and I ask God to join me in that task, in that visualization, it's like within a day or two, boom, I'm doing it and I don't even think twice about it. And then having fun doing it, there's either somebody like shows up out of nowhere and is like, hey, I'm going to help you. And then I'm like, oh my God, that's fabulous. And like, we just get it done and it's happy. Or I just feel inspired to do it and it gets done without thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's like a completely different mind frame than what I've been like, how I used to live. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's such a, yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful process. This book has really allowed so many different alignments and beautiful processes in my thinking and the way that I see the world and how I interact with people and how I see situations. It's like amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It comes down, one thing that I read in the book, it was like that the only meaningful prayer was the request to be able to recognize what you already have. It says that at some point in the book, and I really like that, because every time I think of something I want, I remember this sentence that I read, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just really want to recognize that the only true thing is love. I don't need anything else, that I'm safe, that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful one for sure.
Yeah.
Like that recognition of all the beautiful things that we have. It's so, I started doing it this summer before I started reading this book. And it was like, you know, when I focused on that, everything became easier. Everything. You know, I'd be getting at the end of my long days that I was doing this summer of like building what I was doing. And I'd be like, oh my God, like just feel overwhelmed by it all, and then just count my blessings one after another as I was going to sleep. And then I'd wake up in the next morning and I'd be like, okay, ready to go again. Let's do it. Like, you know, and I could recognize when I wasn't doing it, because then I would wake up and I'd be like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do. But when I did it, it was like, boom, I was like up, ready to go, you know, such a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mm.
All right. So paragraph 5, line 5. Your creation by God is the only foundation that cannot be shaken because the light is in you. Your starting point is truth, and you must return to your beginning. I like that.
I highlighted that one. You must return to your beginning. Like, how does that sit with you guys? How do you?
Well, and this is what I always think about this. Like when I read it, this is what came in for me is I find a lot of inner healing for me now goes back to womb.
Mm,
Because we are such emotional beings, and when we're forming in the womb, we're taking on the emotional imprint of mom and dad, which is almost the basis of everything we create after we're born.
right.
And often I go back and I have to learn from the emotions that I took on from my mom and dad, and it shifts everything. It brings me up right back into alignment with, what my purpose is, what I'm here to do, like everything. So that's what that did for me, but I doubt that that's what that meant.
For me, I feel that in the book, when they mean beginning and they're saying your starting point is truth and the only truth is love. So when they say you must return to your beginning, I feel that you must return to your connection to like the fact that we're only love. But I hear what you say, and I do agree that everything that happens in the womb has an impact on us and all that. But I think beginning here is meant more in the like, like our real beginning. And me, it just like makes me think of how far I wandered sometimes in my life, like completely lost track of where I actually came from as a soul,
Mm.
like I'd be who knows in which country drinking like miserable or whatever, and completely forgetting, like not even tuning in once in the whole month that I was a spirit. You know what I mean? Like how far I've wandered at some point from like the truth. Yeah.
Mm,
And that's a powerful statement. And
yeah.
I just think about how many people are in that state of like just completely don't even recognize that they are beings of love.
Yeah. And you're so focused on what you're doing that day and like, oh, I'm late for work and then, oh, this shift. And then what am I going to eat? Like you're so focused on that, like a bit these things that Fannie was talking about, that you completely forget the greater picture. And like, yeah, it's sad to think that I felt that often and that there's still so many people at the moment living that daily. And I still go into that all the time. Like I feel I'm more often in that, the blinders of my real life, than living out what I'm learning in the book yet. Like I think it's gonna hopefully tip over where I'm gonna be more often living like the way of the book. But
Let's when for me it's so interesting to like recognize that we all have our path and we all have like this divine timing to our journeys. And you said like you felt so like when you were younger and you were traveling and you felt like so far from the beginning, and yet I feel like we're always right there, because it only takes like that split, a miracle to realize that like you're always there, whether it's going to be a thought or someone says something to you, or like there's just this like slight shift and all of a sudden like we never left really. We're still there. We're still there, and we feel like we're far, but it's just like that shift in perception that, yeah.
It's only our ego that tells us the fake news. That's it.
Right. Yeah.
Plus, if you think that time was made up by the ego in a way, so like I felt that I was disconnected for so long in time, but time doesn't actually exist.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. And that brings on like this sensation of just like peace for me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, okay, if all that's true, what do I have to worry about?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Kind of like you were talking about God's bird's eye view of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay.
Yeah, and he would never let us want, like he has so much love for us that he's not going to let us wander out of his reach of the love and light that he can give to us. So no matter how far, let's say, I felt or disconnected, I was still, within the arm reach of him, because he would never let one of his child wander out of his reach,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a powerful realization that, the electrical impulses that run through us all comes from
Mhm.
God, right? So,
Mhm.
I always think it's so funny when I hear somebody say that, I get that there's been so much trauma that we hold God responsible as though he's a man up there making it all happen, right? But I find it funny when somebody says, "Oh, God doesn't exist." I'm like, where do you think that your heartbeat comes from? Where do you think the impulse comes from? Where do you think you're plugged in to be able to have the energy that you wake up every day with, and that tells you to breathe? And even like the evil forces that are existing, where do they think that they get their energy to live? Eventually, we're all going back to the light. So, I mean, there has to be dark in order to be able to find the light. And I get all of that. It makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, it's like, even in your darkest moments, you got to recognize that God is there, and I don't like referring to him as a being, because I feel like it's just an energy that connects every single one of us together,
Mhm.
Mhm.
you know?
Yes. Because power source.
Mhm.
Really thinking of like the plug, and we're all connected to the power source.
Exactly.
Lame joke.
That's how I feel about it. I always chuckle, and every single time I've come face to face with any kind of dark forces, like within myself or others, it's always like, do you not recognize that if you just move back to the light, you'll have everything that you've ever desired and wanted?
Mhm.
And every single dark force is always like, really? Yeah, really? Like it's all there. All you have to do is go and connect with it, and then you get exactly what you want. It's amazing. And then they just, yeah, helping souls cross over that's been like one of the main conversations to have with them, because they just don't recognize they're lost. They've lost that connection. So they're so far away from that connection that in order to reconnect, they just need to be reminded that
Mhm.
they're connected. They've never been disconnected. They're never going to be disconnected. It's impossible to disconnect.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So interesting.
Beautiful. Mhm.
Um, all right. So then if we go to still under paragraph 5, line 8, yourself is still in peace, even though your mind is in conflict. You have not gone back far enough, and that is why you become so fearful. Do you want me to keep reading?
Mm. Well, I was kind of like continuing to read how, like, as you approach the beginning, you feel the fear of destruction and of your thought system upon you, as if it were the fear of death. And there's no death, but there's a belief in it. And I like wrote some notes around like how, like, is that feeling that we get when we're ready to, like, the death of the ego, or the deconstructing of the ego that we're experiencing in those moments when we're scared to take the leap, and we're scared to just trust and have faith in the unknown.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
always kind of choosing love, which is coming back to the beginning when we do so. I feel
Yeah, I
that's
guess we identify with the voice of the ego so much that if the ego were to die, we have the impression that we're going to die, maybe. And the same way that like the body, like the ego thinks that the body is its home. So if the body dies, we also think that we're going to die. So
right.
like ego, body, and like all that is what we think we are.
Absolutely. The thing that I've learned through doing the inner child work, because I went through this really strange period, where I reconnected with God at a really, really deep place. And after that, I went through, it was probably like 2 to 3 weeks where I know my complete identity changed. And so through those 2 to 3 weeks, like every day, I just felt this such an uneasiness inside because I could not be identified the same way as I was before. Like
Mm,
those feelings could not, like they couldn't, I didn't have my identity anymore. Like
Right.
I had built, and this has happened to me a few times in my life. Like when I found my biological father at 22, I went through a complete crash down of identity because everything that I ever taught and what I learned about life after I met him, I recognized that that was not reality, you know? And so I had to deconstruct a bunch of my identity and rebuild myself with the truth of actually knowing who that person is, not just what other people told me he was.
mm,
So that was like a huge shift in identity too. But this one here was even deeper because it was like, I'll tell you a little bit about what happened was I went back to a past life experience where I wasn't even human, but there was a huge bomb that killed all of the people. And I held God responsible. I had a very close relationship with God at that point, and I was not aware that that was going to happen. Whereas I was aware of almost everything that was ever going to happen to me before that. And when I asked, like, how could you not tell me that this was going to happen? He said, if I would have told you, you would have prevented it.
Mm.
So if I would have known that that was going to happen, and he said, you're needed where you are.
Mm.
That's why it had to happen. You had to let go of that physical body you were in order to be where you are, and you're needed where you are.
Mhm.
And like just that love and compassion and understanding, just it shifted a huge part of like this deep, deep seated fear of, you know, dying and losing, losing parts of myself, and then recognizing that you can't ever lose yourself. You can't ever lose the God that lives within. You can't ever lose that part of you that's connected. You can't. It won't ever go anywhere. It's permanent, you know? And then recognizing that and being okay with all of the ways that I have been, gone through the death processes and gone through all the different shifts and changes and like all of the breakdowns in identity to rebuild a new one and like all of that, and just being okay with all of that in a new way. But that took weeks of like waking up daily with this like really uneasy, like, oh my gosh, is this ever gonna go away? Like, and my guides would
Mhm.
just be like, it's gonna be okay. You're just stepping into a new realization, a new reality. And my ego could not be identified by the things that it was before. And that's where the uneasiness was coming from.
mm. Yeah, thanks for sharing. I can
Mhm.
relate. I feel like I went through something very similar in the past 2 months, and it's scary and it's uneasy because like I don't think I've ever felt that vulnerable in my life. It was like I had nothing to hang on to anymore.
Mhm.
Everything that I thought that I could rely on and trust, I was being shown how much I was so attached to these external things. And it really forced me into a corner of, well, going within, really. Yeah. And discovering that in a whole new, like finding that source of security and safety through God and through love.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a full redirection of like focus and energy.
Yeah.
And like and so a lot of people that I work with, I often tell them once you get so far into the inner child process, a lot of times you go through these experiences and then you go through a grief of letting go of that identity. It's like a loss of a very close friend that helps you cope and get through all of these situations in your life. Like you have, like there's just a mourning process that kind of happens.
Mm.
Yeah, such a powerful. Yeah, I like that statement a lot. The last one that I have, and we're kind of getting close. It's already been an hour. Do you believe it?
I'm not surprised.
This conversation has been amazing.
It really is.
So in paragraph 6, line 9, your kingdom is not of this world because it was given you from beyond this world. Only in this world is the idea of an authority problem meaningful. The world is not left by death, but by truth, and truth can be known by all those for whom the kingdom was created and for whom it awaits.
Yeah, I had also highlighted, I felt that was very powerful. The world is not left by death, but by truth.
Very powerful.
Because really this world is all imagined. So the only way to leave it is to see the truth.
And that reminds me of the recognition that I was having when we first started the book, is that when we're in emotion, we are in creation in the world. And so therefore we're looking for a validation or attachment to the outside world in some way. And then when we move inwards and we're more focused inwards, that is the truth. That is truth that we're all looking for. And that emotion is there to help us when things in the outside world is not in alignment, or when there's something that we need to learn, or there's an instinct that we need to become aware of.
So do you mean that like emotions are kind of like a little light bulb that comes on when it's time to like look inwards and shift something? Is that what you mean?
I believe that, yeah.
Like a compass, I would say.
Yeah.
Compass,
yeah.
Compass.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And it reminds me, because I took notes here, that in the Course in Miracle Made Easy, when they say authority problem, I was reading that it says that you have an authority problem when you think it's up to you to decide what reality is. So that kind of shifts a bit, because I got a bit confused earlier when we were talking about it, because I had forgotten that was the meaning of it. So which makes even more sense that the world is left by death, and is not by death, but by truth.
Yeah, I still don't know if I understand that one fully. Like the world is not left by death, but by truth. What do they mean by the world, you think?
So
I think this world that we're living in.
the external reality that we're connected to right now.
Yeah. And then when we leave, then we know what's true.
Well, we only know the truth when we move inside. When we're paying more attention to what's happening at the inner core of our being, instead of our emotions and instead of our thoughts. Like emotions are there as compasses to help us around in the world, and thoughts are there to assist us in the aspects that we have to carry out. But our real truth sits in that core, like that peaceful core, that where love is.
I see. I wonder though, because I thought that we're going to be able to like move on from this world once every single person sees the truth. You know what I mean?
Oh, I totally agree.
So then we'll be able to leave this world. Like we won't even be able to live in it and realize it's an illusion. We're going to like completely, it's just going to disappear once everyone. So it's not, it doesn't take everyone to die. So it's not left by death, but it takes everyone to realize the truth for this whole illusion to disappear, and then we would all leave this world. That's how I see it.
Oh, now I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
The world is left by truth. Wow. Right.
Because it says at the beginning of the book that we're all here until we all come to the truth.
Exactly. So even if like we're starting to see the truth, we're not completely probably 100% living it. But even if we were 100% realizing it's an illusion, it's not enough. We need to that's why later in the book, it keeps on saying how important it is to try to like share the truth with others.
Yeah. To
Yeah.
live in that truth.
Yeah.
Interesting, huh? Oh,
Yeah.
and it's so fascinating to see like just the flow of life right now and like the wave of people, like the amount of conversations that I'm having with people that are just like, I don't like to say the word waking up, but they're just like, you can tell that they're connecting to like this, their spirituality and questioning things and being like, okay, they're remembering.
Yes.
Going back to their beginning, and it's happening more and more. And this wave is just like, kind of see like this pebble in the water, and the ripple effect is just like catching and catching and catching.
Yes. And especially when I heard Linda talking about the way that your daughter is being influenced by your waking up, it's like I hear more and more parents that are teaching their children at such a young age this new way, kind of. So I'm like, whoa, the next generation, like they're gonna have, like they're not just gonna having woke up at 30, like let's say we did a bit or whatever age we did, they're gonna have like just grew up in it already. So kind of one step ahead. I mean, it's never too late. And I always had some sort of spirituality, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's just becoming more and more of a thing for parents to recognize. It's becoming easier and easier to give our children what they need, because we are being able, like, even though they're still trying to make it look like we're not safe, make it, and that's, I think, part of the matrix. That's what the part of the, you know, especially like 2020, if you know much about numerology, like the 2020 is all about like soul awakening to itself and like all of that, and how strong they came at us with all of the fear-based thinking, how to keep us confined, even though there was this like blanket of awakening and awareness happening straight across the entire globe. It was happening, but they were trying to keep us from not having that.
Right.
But it's happening.
At the same time, it's fueling the people waking up as well.
Yeah.
We're starting to question how things aren't aligning.
Yeah.
And so,
oh yeah,
like the divine timing of everything, like it's where I'm like, it's just, yeah, we're there in this. It's just, yeah, we're there in our evolution or on our path or on the way to us. I don't even know what the right word is to use, because again, if time doesn't exist, then I don't want to use the word time, but
it always makes me question though, why we had, because we're going to end up exactly where we were at the start in love and light. So why did we have to go through all this? Like sometimes I wonder, I'm like, fuck.
Well, I think it's the planet's evolutionary process. That's what I believe. I personally believe inside of us, that's what we're here for, is the planet's evolutionary process. So there was like all of this energy, and also the coming together of all of these different celestial beings, and that all of our genetics was created with all of those genes together so that we'd all look the same, but have different ways of doing things and learn how to work collectively. And I think that's the great experiment if you want to like, look at it from that perspective. But that's Dolores Cannon coming out there.
I knew it. I recognized it.
Have you guys seen the movie Celestials? Is it Celestial? No, Eternals. It's a new Marvel movie that just came out.
No.
And it literally like just describes everything we just talked about.
Really? I'm gonna take notes.
Yeah, I would be curious for you guys to watch it, and we could have a conversation about it on the side, because like,
where did you watch
Marvel is going there with this way of seeing the world and why we could be here on this journey doing all of this.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What's the name of it again?
Eternals.
And where did you watch it?
I rented it on YouTube.
Okay. I haven't watched any of the Marvels, so I'm totally out of the loop, but I'll check this one out maybe.
Yeah, no, it's good.
Awesome. What a lovely conversation. Thank you so much, ladies. Like, I really, and again, I think we only did like 2 pages, but that's okay because again, just these conversations are so powerful and they're so connected. And I really just am so grateful for them. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much. Like, it's such a rich and fueling conversation, this. I get off of these calls and I'm like, whoo, fired up and ready to like conquer even more of the day.
It's so
They're
true.
really inspiring. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you both.
Yeah. And anybody watching, if you resonate with this, please hit the subscribe button and follow this channel because there's lots of information being shared all the time. And, you know, it's all about awakening. So, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right, ladies.
Thank you, girls.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye.
Yes.
See you later.
Bye.